count you down. Stand by. Have a good show.
Thanks, Rich. Hello again. Welcome to another edition of Media Watch. I'm your host for this edition, Eric Tait, and our guest for this session is Daia El Sanusi, radio host. Welcome again to Media Watch,
Well, thank
Daia.
you. Thank you so much for having me.
Always a pleasure. Show is brought to you with the good graces of Manhattan Neighborhood Network and EVT Educational Productions. And we're, as usual, pre-taping, not usual, but usually we pre-tape. And so we're taping the Wednesday before the Monday that this airs, Daia. So some of the stuff we'll be talking about that's breaking in the news will probably still be breaking. Some of it has already broken and might still be trembling into the ether. And then, of course, there will be new things. So to get started, politics is still ruling the roost nationally, and Democrats and Republicans are vying for their presidential nominee, Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton on the Democratic side, and still a host of people, down to 4, maybe 5 on the Republican side. So Super Tuesday was the, when this airs, the week before, and Donald Trump was the big winner. Not that much in delegate lead. I think his delegate lead may only be, he may have picked up an additional 23 or something to that effect, but he's still the big winner. Won in any number of states, at least.
For sure.
At least 7, maybe more. Marco Rubio, maybe 3rd in a bunch of places, and won the Minnesota caucuses. And Ted Cruz won 3, so they're now the big 3: Trump, Cruz, Rubio. Ben Carson hasn't made up his mind whether he's going to drop out or not, and John Kasich is going to hang in there till Ohio at least. And if he does well in Ohio, he may hang in even further. So, from what you've been looking at about these candidates, Bob Anthony and I usually talk about, yeah, okay, so this is going on, but what does it mean to black and brown people in this country? What's your take on all this stuff as it's coming down?
Well, Eric, it's for me, it's a real awakening to the inner thoughts of people who have a real issue with black and brown peoples in this country. And we're moving towards a much more multiracial society. We're moving towards greater equality. There's hope for the future, but these are the dark days. These are certainly the dark days, and Trump represents a naked racism and virulent, violent kinds of sentiments that are alarming to many, many people.
It's interesting you should say that, because Mitt Romney last Wednesday, which is when we're taping, no, last Thursday, actually came out and lambasted Donald Trump, who the presumptive possible Republican Party nominee based on his lead and the narrowing of the time span for these other people to catch up in the delegate count. And basically, people called him out by saying, in 2012, you were looking for this man's endorsement. You were practically genuflecting to get him to support you. Why? What happened to that love fest? And Mitt Romney came right out and said, had Donald Trump been saying all the things he was saying in 2012 against Mexicans, rapists, drug dealers, against Muslims, don't let them into the country, against all this xenophobia and keeping well, had he been saying that stuff, according to Romney, he said, I would not have wanted an endorsement, I would not have accepted his endorsement. And so basically, I think you put your finger on it perfectly by saying he has triggered some amazing, amazing negativity. And no matter how negative he gets and how nasty he gets, he just seems to keep bringing out more Republican voters supporting him. What's your take on that?
Well, I think that people are relieved to be able to express the truth of their feelings, to admit that they are racist, that they have a fear of a black planet, all of the things that they have been acculturated to for over 100 years about the other, are things that they're free to express openly now because Trump is taking the lead in expressing exactly those sentiments, even to the point of advocating for criminality as it pertains to waterboarding, something that Trump has said that he would advocate for, or worse.
Waterboarding is torture. I mean, there's no such, so the bottom line is...
Well, that's what makes it criminal. If you
it's against
advocate...
the Geneva Convention,
exactly,
that's for sure.
It's against the Geneva Convention. It's patently illegal. It's immoral. It is a form of torture. And this country is ratified to object to and hold as criminal anybody who practices that.
Right, but Donald Trump seems to get applause and more followers the more he espouses that form of behavior on the part of the country, not himself, on the part of the country. He's saying if he were president, he would bring that back.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Even more.
Well, do you think that he's taking the lead from the bold acts of the last Bush, the baby Bush?
Well, I mean, they did a lot of stuff under George W. Bush. I'm not sure whether I'm blaming George W. Bush or Dick Cheney or Donald Rumsfeld. You can take your pick. As far as I'm concerned, Rumsfeld was what, Secretary of Defense at the time?
Yes.
Let me put it this way. They got themselves some very fine line legal justification, supposedly from one of the lawyers in the Attorney General's office to say, yeah, it's okay to do those things. And so they claimed that they were being legal.
And see, that's the problem. I think that we're facing a situation where the chickens come home to roost, because you have actions that have been underhandedly sanctioned by attorney generals and others in seats of power all along. So now for Trump to be able to stand up and say these things openly and outwardly, people are saying, oh, there's no more need for hypocrisy. Let us just be who it is that we really are.
Actually, the whole bit about the chickens coming home to roost really strikes home for me, because the Republican Party for the last 40 years have been using this kind of coded language in all its political campaigns. It's been basically using what people call dog whistle rhetoric. Yes. That's supposed to just appeal to the far fringe base, because if they came right out and said what they were thinking, they'd be called out for being racist and xenophobic and anti-whatever. And so they were trying to use coded language. And Donald Trump basically has said, I don't need to use coded language.
That's right.
Everybody thinks like I think anyway,
That's
so
right.
let me just say it the way. And so the bottom line is, you're right, the chickens have come home to roost. And so here is Donald Trump, the Republican front runner, and now the establishment is trying to figure out a way to stop him from being their nominee, because as a lot of their pundits have been saying, a lot of their party bosses have been saying, this could be the death of the Republican Party. My take is that the Republican Party had splintered tremendously once the Tea Party came into ascendancy. And so
Certainly.
as far as I'm concerned, what we're witnessing is a public death throw of the Republican Party. I don't know how it's going to reform itself, whether it's going to come back and call itself the Republican Party, or if they try to broker their convention and not let the will of the Republican voters that has been expressed by all these primaries so far, and if he gets the requisite number or most of it going into the convention, if they try to take it from him, I think there'll be a revolt.
Well, I like what you asked me in terms of what this means for black and brown peoples here in this country. And I think the bottom line is black and brown peoples and all people of good conscience have to step up and actively defend any semblance of democracy. Now, it's now or never, because the faction that's emboldened by Trump, his thought patterns, his philosophies and actions, will take this country down. And that's where it's headed. It is really headed, and everything will be up for grabs. So if there's going to be any form of humanity and defense of human rights and democratic will and any hope for the country and the people in it, we're going to have to, black, brown, and everybody else of good conscience is going to have to step up to the plate and actively defend what's right.
Okay, speaking of what's right, and talking about black and brown people, that's a good enough segue to sort of backtrack a little bit, because as you and I both discussed when I was on your show, at least partially, you're going to have to tell our viewers exactly what the name of your radio show is before I continue.
Well, I was so glad to have you as my special guest, especially early in the morning there in the show, which is titled The Gardens of Tranquility and Contemplation. And First Light Meditation starts at 6 o'clock in the morning, goes till 11 in the morning at WHCR 90.3 FM.
Exactly right. And we did the last weekend in February a very interesting Black History Month programming.
It was a beautiful Black History Month programming, thanks to your great productivity, your creativity, and that beautiful documentary that you created.
Well, the radio documentary, Then I'll Be Free to Travel Home, actually grew out of the project we did with Lena Horne, that very last film project that she was working on. That's Then I'll Be Free to Travel Home, which was the legacy of the New York African burial ground, which we'll get to. I need to talk about that. But before we segue to that,
yes,
there was a little bit leading into that weekend, because that was leading up to the Oscars, the whole brouhaha about Oscars so white. And so there was this whole thing about black and brown people totally being shut out of any nominations. And I don't mean just the actors, I mean in all categories, except for, I guess it was the Mexican director who swept a lot of stuff. There were no black or brown nominees. And I'm wondering, and Hollywood's supposed to be one of the most liberal towns going on, but if in quote liberal bastion like Hollywood, stuff is so entrenched that you could 2 years in a row get an Oscar slate that is just so all white.
mm-hmm.
What does that say about the progress of black and brown people in this country, and the need for black and brown people to step up to the plate when it comes to the arts and owning their own and doing for themselves?
Well, wouldn't you consider it something like art imitating life? Where you have
art platforms imitating real life platforms. Okay, continue.
It's these are several years in a row that the Oscars have had protests and deep feeling conversations about a lack of recognition of black writers, black producers, black directors, and so on. The winners, the black and brown winners, have been token in terms of the number and percentage represented for a number of years.
Oh, yeah, talking just in numbers, because the performances
Certainly.
were outstanding.
The performances were outstanding, but they somehow the judges failed to recognize those performances and give them the acknowledgement that they so rightfully deserved.
Well, the ones that managed to get nominated and win actually got recognized, but just using this year, for example, there were so many outstanding performances that just got overlooked, weren't even mentioned.
That's right.
And so which brings us to...
There was a blackout on them, if you will.
Very interestingly put. But just some folks may have slept it, I don't think so, but there was a counter type programming because the ABFF, the Black Film Festival folk, decided they would do their show, which they call A Salute to Hollywood Folk, in which they honored a whole lot of black and brown actors that had toiled in the trenches in Hollywood. And I made sure that I watched that show just to get reminded of how we need to affirm ourselves and our talent. And that's something that they honored Diane Carroll.
Yes.
They honored a whole bunch of folk.
Oh,
and
so
then,
deservedly.
And then similarly,
BET.
Ava DuVernay, it was on BET, and Ava DuVernay and a bunch of other Hollywood and celebrities, not just Hollywood people, like really Stevie Wonder and some other folks, they went to Flint, Michigan. And they performed a benefit for the city of Flint because, as we've discussed on Media Watch in the past, Flint has been neglected by the state of Michigan and got all kinds of lead pipes, corroded lead pipes with the water going through. And so the health of the residents of the city of Flint has been endangered for more than a year by the state government. And so it might take $50 million to replace those pipes. The governors finally said, okay, we'll give you $2 million. And from the time they blew the whistle, not one pipe has been removed. Nothing's been changed or done yet.
No, it's a human rights issue.
Yeah,
it
is.
really is the right to clean water.
But it's also a criminal issue. I think somebody should be going to jail for that.
Absolutely. And a lot of people do. And so you have a perfect example of people stepping up to address the issue and take leadership responsibility. People with good conscience taking a role as leaders to raise monies to help to alleviate the problem and bring a spotlight to it.
Well, I'm glad they actually picked the weekend of the Oscars to do that benefit, because it was a double affirmation. It was, we can do for ourselves, we can do for our own. Just like I know the ABFF program was pre-taped, but they picked a slot that would actually be competitive to the Oscars, at least within the first hour of the Oscars, because the Oscars run for 3 hours.
And I heard the viewing numbers were high, too.
Yes. I'm quite sure. I made sure I watched it.
Yes.
So I'm sure a lot of other black and brown people watched.
I got calls from folks who just checked in on this station to make sure that their numbers were in.
Oh, okay. That's good to
absolutely. But you're right. There is the counter recognition and acknowledgement of so much fine work that has been done by people of color. And then there is the doing of good, that really speaks to the fact that people of wealth and modest means can come together to solve some of the problems that we're facing in terms of water, the future of the food wars, the issue of sustainability, climate concerns. I mean, we're really getting involved and we're stepping up, and I'm so happy to know that.
Well, one of the things, I really wish Clarissa Clay had been able to make this taping with us, because Clarissa was one of the original founders of the Real Sisters Film Festival.
Oh, excellent. And I know Carolyn Butts has been involved.
Yes, that's exactly right.
That's right. She and Clarissa and
I don't remember
Carolyn.
all the ladies, but they came together because they said, you got all these film festivals around the country and we have a hard time getting our films in there, especially ladies of color. And so they said, Real Sisters, REEL. And so they found it. Well, Clarissa's good friend, fellow Black Documentary Collective member, and so I don't know if you remember back in 2008 when we did the 350th Harlem anniversary celebrations. Clarissa was the curator of the film festival that we incorporated into that.
Excellent.
Back, and then it was a film festival to
And
highlight.
she's a real lady too. I like Clarissa.
Yeah, she's fabulous. She's a filmmaker in her own right.
Yes.
She's an educator. And so I've got her doing double duty again, and she's going to curate and program this Media Magic Mount Vernon International Film Festival that we're going to be doing at the end of March 31st
Excellent.
through April 2nd.
March 31st through April 2nd.
Yes,
Very
Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Yeah, we talked a little bit about it on your show.
Yes. I was very
and-
proud to learn about it.
Well, you know, the reason why I decided we needed to try to do that, I'm trying the media center that I'm working with in Mount Vernon, New York, it's like flying under the radar, so we need to raise the profile level of that. And so we got
It's
a
at
lot
the
of
Dole
great-
Center.
At the Dole Center, we got a lot of great volunteers. The great DP, Bobby Shepard, is one of our volunteer instructors. Fellow ABC alum of mine, Ray Peterson, he's one of our volunteers. Jeff Monroe, another, Al Santana student protege. Al Santana, another BDC. I say BDC, that's the Black Documentary Collective, which was founded by St. Clair Bourne.
Yes.
Charles Jones, another filmmaker. All these folks have been volunteering at that center, but like I said, it's flying under the radar. And so we're going to do this film festival, and guess what? It's the 25th anniversary of the rediscovery of the New York African burial ground in Lower Manhattan.
Incredible.
And so we are going to screen Then I'll Be Free to Travel Home, Lena's last film, at the opening day of that festival down at the New York African Burial Ground.
Well, you have to be really proud of that documentary, that DVD and documentary, because of the extensive interviews that I heard on my show that you conducted.
The radio
that you,
version? Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
I mean, it was just absolutely remarkable to hear experts from Howard University, from the Schomburg Center, from any number of areas speak to the discovery, the need to recognize and honor the cemetery, the historical legacy of the Africans who peopled early New York, and as you explained to me, since 1624 the first Africans were brought to New York to work.
So yes, you're right about that, and
Incredible.
and that's not. I mean, it's not just that I'll Be Free to Travel Home that's going to be in that. There are a number. But we're going to honor St. Clair Bourne again.
Great. And you've got women filmmakers who are going to present their films.
Yes.
Excellently.
Some of the films that will be screened. Sabrina Gordon is one of the directors of Bad Sonia Sanchez. That's going to be screened in the festival. Karen Mafundikwa's The Price of Memory is going to be screened at the festival. Paula Madison's Finding Samuel Lowe, that's going to be screened at the festival. We got a film from Brazil by Joel Araujo called Daughters of the Wind. Fabulous film that he really loves. I think when that film came out, it was the first film that had predominantly all Afro-Black Brazilians in it. And so he loves that film. And so we're going to screen that one. Charles Jones's Autistic Like Me is going to be there. We're getting a 30 by 30 film from ESPN called The 16th Man, dealing with Nelson Mandela and the whole soccer, how it came to be as a driving force.
So our tools, sports and arts.
Hey,
Yes.
our preeminent tools.
That's right.
And we'll be just got confirmation that the United Nations Remembering Slavery will come on board as a collaborator. So
Congratulations.
there's a film called The Ark of Return. That's a small 6-minute film that will fit into the theme of the festival.
Will it describe the great monument that has
been describe the work that Rodney Leone has put together to mark the transatlantic slave trade.
Yes.
And Rodney Leon is the architect who also did the memorial down at the African Burial Ground in
Yes, he
Lower
is a
Manhattan.
young Haitian architect with immense talent.
So I'm guessing that we probably got about 2.5 minutes left.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me, are you going to be recycling some more of Then I'll Be Free to Travel Home on Gardens of Tranquility?
We air on Saturday mornings, and I certainly will be. You know, you can tune in at whcr.org and join me. And once you go online, you can find a telephone number for us and call in and chat about this conversation and many more, and the things that are deepest concern to us. And I will be talking more about your marvelous Media Magic Film Festival. I'm so proud of the work.
Yeah, I'm really happy that media folks like you understand the need for us to support each other.
And I want to say, Ebony Joanne, what a marvelous voice.
I actually meant to roll in the promo reel for Then I'll Be Free to Travel Home.
Oh, yeah.
But I think we're out of time for that. So I'm going to guess that if we...
Do we have a minute to just advocate for some activities, some action on the part of...
Well, folks, you can go to our website. That's www.mediamagicevted.org. And click on that, and all the background info on the film festival, who we're honoring, like St. Clair Bourne and Tina Satin and Ruby Dee, and of course, Bad Sonia Sanchez. So look, visit us, come out to the festival. The other screening will be opening day, Burial Ground, Lower Manhattan, and City College Documentary Forum will be screening Bad Sonia Sanchez simultaneously on March 31st. There'll be info on that as well. So without further ado, I want to thank Daia Sanusi,
Yes,
for
indeed.
being our guest on Media Watch.
What a pleasure. Thank you.
And we'll catch you the next time. Thank you, EVT Educational Productions, and thank you, Manhattan Neighborhood Network.